Good morning, everyone. This is God Talks, and I am Ryan Fleming, and right there is Noah's Ark. It looks tiny, but it's enormous. It's almost 2 football fields long, but I'm really far away. This is as close as I could get with the car. But I was passing through Kentucky. I thought it would be a nice backdrop. But I did want to talk to you briefly about New Year's resolutions. I know a handful of people whose relationship with God is inspiring. People who believe in and live holy lives. Individuals whose exceptional wisdom is undeniable. Ones whose lives shine so bright and reflect so much of the God they love that His presence in their lives is beyond comprehension. And every one of them testify to and promote practices and routines that have more than just a role to play in their walk with God, but that act as the fertile ground through which the spiritual fruit springs forth and grows as sustenance for their very being. To some who hear of or know of people like this, their lives are admirable. However, they are seen as unrealistic or unattainable. Is this unrealistic in today's world? Is this unrealistic for people with careers and families? Is this unrealistic for people who have great responsibilities or life challenges that require much of their time and effort? Is it unrealistic to draw so close to God that people just see the light of Christ shining through you? Well, the answer to these questions is not going to be found through philosophical discussion. But what if I told you that there are honest and authoritatively truthful answers to these questions? You see, the Bible gives us the opportunity to study without end to find essential answers to the questions concerning how each one of us should live our lives. These days we like to say to each their own, or what's true for you may not be true for someone else. Although there is some truth to what is being communicated with such statements, they fall short of incorporating the wisdom found in the Scriptures. God has inspired the writings of the Word of God and speaks to us through it in a way that has the power to transform our lives by the renewing of our minds. He instructs us on how even to think. In Philippians, he tells us to think about, only to think about, he says, things that are pure, things that are good, things that are holy, things that are positive, things that are of good report, things like that. And he instructs us to make that effort to think that way and not to think other ways, to think negatively or harshly or accusatorily or defensively, things of that nature. So this is just one example of endless examples. But I'm sure that everyone would agree that following that advice would be beneficial to our lives, our relationship with God, and our interaction with others. So moving into this new year, I'd like to talk to you about fitting in. I've heard parents often speak of desiring that their kids would fit in at school, or that their kids are having a hard time fitting in. To my detriment, when I was in school, I learned to fit in very well. The path led me away from God, unfortunately. You see, God does not want us to fit Him into our lives. That's when He gets diminished in our lives. He wants us to fit our lives into Him so that He's always growing. And our lives and our work and our families follow in that. Our passions follow. He tells us to seek Him, and that when we seek Him with all our heart, that we'll find Him. You see, He does not describe seeking Him as being dangerous to us in any way. Now, of course, that doesn't mean everything's going to go well. We still live in a fallen world. But we are to implement His calling on our lives, and that will result in benefit to us. That will result in growth. So how do we fit our lives into God? For starters, things may have to change a bit. But change like this doesn't come by accident. We must be intentional and thoughtful about the changes that we want to make, or the changes that we want to allow God to make. So with the New Year's resolutions in mind, I have a couple of exercises for you. First, think about practices worth making routine. I'm sure very quickly you can think of many. It's common for resolutions in the new year to involve physical exercise. And that's a good thing. That's definitely a good thing. The Bible actually says that physical exercise is valuable. A little bit. It actually says it in a different way, but it's basically comparing the value of physical exercise to spiritual exercise. And obviously, spiritual is a lot more important and more valuable on an eternal scale. Another common New Year's resolution is financial goals and how to attain them, and setting goals and routines in order to get those things that you're seeking to grow into. Now, this is also good, but they also fall short of the eternal value. The Bible and Jesus, He tells us not to store up treasures on earth that will perish, but to store up treasures in heaven that will never perish. A young rich ruler comes up to Jesus and he asks him, how can I enter into the kingdom of heaven? And he tells him that he has to follow certain commandments, and he lists a handful. And the young rich ruler says, well, I've been doing these things since I was young. And Jesus says, yes, but you lack one thing. Pick up your cross and follow me. So this young rich ruler had accomplished much. He obviously had good discipline. He was obviously intelligent, smart, and probably had routines for those kinds of success. And he was even spiritual, if you'll call it that, religious perhaps. But Jesus says he was lacking something that was interfering with his evolvement towards getting into the kingdom of heaven, and interfered with his intimate relationship with Jesus. And so he told him to sell all that he had, to pick up his cross, and to follow him. And the young rich ruler walked away sad because he was very wealthy and he didn't like what he heard. So he had something interfering. And that's one of the reasons that I am encouraging you guys to look at your New Year's resolutions. No matter what resolutions you set, the most important ones should be concerning God. Now let's look at what God has taught us about valuable routines. He has told us to pray without ceasing. Now this doesn't mean to start a prayer and never end and sit at home and don't go out and do anything but to pray the entire time. No, but it is a hyperbole. It's exaggerating the concept that we should be in prayer as a foundation of our lives, a daily routine, if not multiple times a day in long periods of time. There are people who come up with these kinds of lifelong routines that implement them. They oftentimes use prayer as one of those valuable routines. He also tells us to meditate or to study the Word day and night. Again, hyperbole. But it's obvious that he's trying to show us the importance of studying the Word, not just when it's convenient for us, but as a foundation for our days. He also asks us to think on those things which are positive and good, as I talked about a few moments ago, things that are holy, things that are pure, to focus your attention and your thoughts on those things rather than on things that are negative, that are not positive. So those individuals I mentioned at the beginning of the message, they all spend a lot of time doing the things that result in bringing them close to God. It's a passion for them as well as a priority. I've got a list here actually of people that I have either studied or known. John Wesley, he was an evangelist in the 1700s, and when he went to college, he started a religious society. And he believed in these, quote-unquote routines that would draw him closer to God. And so the kids, I guess, the college students, they started calling him a Methodist because he claimed basically by his actions that there's a method to growing close to God. And that's where the denomination of Methodists come from. Interestingly enough, he did not join the Methodist denomination, but he was very successful. He made a lot of money. He spent 2% of the money he made his whole life on himself. The other 98% he gave away to the poor and other needs. But he was very successful, very organized, obviously a very busy man. He organized a worldwide movement that is still going on today. He wrote newsletters and had a lot of income from newsletters and writings, so he's very busy doing writings. He also wrote many hymns, so it's not like he had to put aside all of the responsibilities of life, even success, even generating income and things of that nature in order to draw close to God. He made God that first priority, and he fit his life into God. I have a mentor, John Graperis, who I know very well, and his walk with God is just, it's hard to even understand. It's so close. And it's not like he had to stop living his life either. He has a family, he has kids, he has grandkids. He's had a successful business all his life, a good career. He's now retired and he's writing a lot. He's putting even more time into God. Peter Weber, another friend of mine, very smart, was an engineer until he retired, always putting his life into God and God into his life and making him a priority. Gene Wagstaff, a good friend of mine, whose career branched out into a ministry, a church, and he's the same way. I stayed with him for a few weeks at the beginning of this year when COVID set in, so we both had extra time, and honestly we were studying 6, 8, 10 hours a day, and that's natural for him. That's how much time he puts in, and he still has this successful business, but he has a church with people that love him, and I mean, he just puts God first. It's not coincidental, my friends, and it doesn't come without a passionate pursuit of God. an intimate walk with him. But the good thing is he wants us to pursue him because he is already pursuing us. We may just need to put time aside to slow down and listen, to develop a relationship with him. 1 John 2 answers a question. The question is, how can we know that we have an intimate relationship with Jesus? I'm going to let you look up that answer though. I'm going to leave it up to you. Look up that answer. It's in 1 John chapter 2, and that's something to ponder. That's something to meditate on and to pray about. We need to know that our intimacy is at the level that God desires. You ever think of it that way? It's not a matter as much about what we desire, even though that desire should be great. It's great for me. But we should know how much intimacy he desires, because if he desires an intimacy with us, then he will provide us with the know-how and the will to pursue that intimacy. So may 2021 be a year of a renewed spirit within all people on earth. May love be our first priority, and may we come to know deeper the God who is love. Thank you for joining me on God Talks. I'll see you next time.